How's it going, my bakers? Hope you're having a great day so far. Welcome to episode number 7 of the rye bread series. Today we're making a dark rye bread made with white rye flour and flavored with caraway seeds. So let's go to the kitchen and get started. This is a pretty straightforward and easy recipe, but the resulting bread is exceptional. It has that classic dark rye look and taste. The caraway flavor is accompanied by dark molasses and fermented rye malt powder. It is an ingredient that we've used before, and as I have mentioned previously, the only place where I have found it is on eBay. It comes from Eastern Europe and it takes weeks to arrive, but it's well worth the wait. Just search for fermented rye malt powder, and trust me, once you try this stuff, you may just start trying to incorporate it into other recipes. It adds a very nice dark, rich flavor and aroma, slightly sweet and bitter. The best rye breads are made using that ingredient in my opinion. But of course, I can't tell you what's good. You have to try it for yourself. And this would certainly be a great recipe to start with. Also, if you're new to rye bread, this is also a good starting point. So let me show you how it's made. Starting with the ingredients. The bulk of this dough will be made up of white rye flour. And we're going to add a little bit of white wheat flour for structure and lightness. We'll also need some yeast, salt, caraway seeds, and the fermented rye malt powder. And this is what it looks like. It has a very dark brown, kind of reddish color, and it has a very strong roasted aroma. It kind of reminds me of ground coffee. Without this ingredient, this bread will taste nowhere close to what it should taste like. Couple more things, we'll need some molasses, vinegar, and water. The molasses are there for flavor and sweetening, but also for acidity, as well as the vinegar. Rye breads with high rye flour content need some acid, or else they may turn out sticky. It is called starch attack. I have spoken about it in previous videos. Okay, as for the equipment, we'll need a tray with some non-stick paper, a bowl, scales, a dough scraper, a temperature probe, and something to slash the dough with. You can use a razor blade attached to a lamb, or you can use a sharp knife, or even a pair of scissors. And last but not least, a spray bottle of water would come in handy. We'll use it to moisten the loaf, and then stick the caraway seeds to it. And the moisture will also help it expand as it bakes. But if you don't have one of these, you can just brush the water on. Okay, with all that out of the way, let's start the process. And it begins with a pre-ferment. My kitchen is relatively cool, at around 23 degrees Celsius or 73 degrees Fahrenheit. And it's only going to get cooler overnight. So I'm going to start my pre-ferment off slightly warmer. I want the mix to be around 26 degrees Celsius or 79 degrees Fahrenheit. This will be slightly unusual pre-ferment, because we'll be adding more ingredients besides flour, water and yeast. It will also contain the vinegar, the caraway seeds, and the malted rye powder. The vinegar is there to kind of mimic a natural leaven, making the pre-ferment acidic. And of course, you could just use your starter instead and build the leaven using these ingredients and skip the vinegar. I decided to add the caraway seeds to get more flavor out of them. And I added the rye malt to ensure that it's properly soaked. And that way we'll also get the most out of it. Around 1/3 of the flour of this recipe is being pre-fermented. Okay, mix all the ingredients up, double check the temperature for reference. Mine turned out at around 26 degrees Celsius. I wanted it relatively warm, because I only want to ferment this for 12 hours. You could leave yours for longer if you wanted to, 16, 18 hours even. And if you're not ready to bake, when the pre-ferment is ready, you can always pop it in the fridge and leave it there for later. I'm going to continue. It is the next morning now, and we can finish mixing the final dough. Add the remaining water, the yeast, and the salt, and then give it all a good mix. Make sure to dissolve the salt completely. If you're using a natural leaven, I would also suggest adding yeast at this point. The leaven is there for flavor and acidity, and the yeast is just there to make the bread rise. Okay, next let's mix in the molasses. You could swap this for other sweet syrups like honey, maple syrup, malt syrup, or black treacle. Right, next up, add the wheat flour. And at this point I decided to switch to a whisk. It ensures that there are no lumps. It is important to mix a dough like this in stages. Because we're not kneading it, we need to ensure that the ingredients are distributed evenly. And the whisk does a great job with that too. Okay, finally, add the remaining white rye flour and mix it to a dough. Mix until there's no dry flour left. It will be super soft and sticky, so you can wet your hands to handle it to make your life easier. I did use slightly warm water in the final mix, so that the dough temperature turns out to be at around 26 degrees Celsius or 79 degrees Fahrenheit. At this temperature, bulk fermentation should take around an hour and a half. If your kitchen is cooler, it'll take longer. If it's warmer, it'll take less time. You want the dough to double in size basically, so keep an eye on it. Once it's nice and big, it is ready for final shaping. It is quite sticky still, so do dust it with some flour before you take it out the bowl. Now when it came to final shaping, my instincts kicked in. and I went for the old wheat bread shaping method by flattening the dough and then rolling it up, which is not really necessary. You could just degas the dough ball and then kind of mold it into an oblong loaf shape without rolling it up. It'll work either way really. Just make it as straight and as even as you can. And once you're happy with the shape, cover it up and leave it for final proofing. It'll take around 1 hour. During the final proof, you want to preheat the oven, 250 degrees Celsius, fan off, and that is 480 degrees Fahrenheit. We will turn the temperature down once the loaf hits the oven. The reason why I like to start it off hot is because a loaf like this will take quite some time to bake. And I don't want the heating element of the oven to keep coming on and then going off again. Because when it does that, it can darken the top crust too much. If we bake the bread in the oven that is cooling down, then we don't face that issue, at least for most of the bake. Okay, before the loaf goes in the oven, spray it generously with water all over and then sprinkle it with caraway seeds. Gently press the seeds into the dough so that they stick, and score the surface before you place the loaf in the oven. And you can cut it any way that you like, you don't have to follow my lines. Okay, this bad boy is ready for the oven. It'll take around 50 to 60 minutes to fully bake. As soon as you close the door, turn down the heat to 180 degrees Celsius or 355 Fahrenheit. If after 50 minutes you're not sure of the doneness of your loaf, you can always take its temperature. If it reads above 94 degrees Celsius or 200 degrees Fahrenheit, it is fully baked. Of course, you should judge it by the crust color too. If you think it's too light, then bake it for longer. Whilst my loaf is fully baked, it is not quite done yet. A bread like this needs to mature before you can cut into it. If you cut it too soon, it'll be gummy inside. So I wrapped mine up in a tea towel and left it overnight. Alternatively, chill the loaf down slightly more and then wrap it up in some plastic wrap. It'll help it retain more moisture and it'll make the crust softer. But there you have it. That's how you make a dark rye bread with white rye flour. It's a nice little freestanding loaf with a distinct flavor and a nice dense texture. But while it is dense, it is still quite flexible and bouncy. The great thing about rye bread is that it stays fresh for so much longer than wheat bread does. The starchy gel that traps fermentation gases in rye bread is a lot better at holding onto moisture than gluten does in wheat flour bread. Let's see what this bread looks like 1 week later. It will of course lose some moisture, but as you can see, it's still got that bounce to it and it's still nice and flexible. And if anything, it tastes even better than before. Let me remind you that you can share pictures of your bakes in our Flickr group. It is a nice little community of baking enthusiasts, and I certainly love seeing all the things that they bake. You'll find it linked in the video description below. So what do you think this recipe? And what do you prefer? A freestanding loaf or one baked in a tin? Let me know down in the comments. If you want to see more videos like this one, click over here. Subscribe to the channel, click right here. That's all I have for you today. Thanks so much for watching. I'll see you in the next one.